Welcome to the fire where kings are forged, not born. Welcome to the war where the wise do not beg for peace. They build kingdoms of silence. They control outcomes with invisible strings. And welcome to the moment where you realize that you were never part of the game. You were always the one designing the board. You were never a piece on it. You were the hand moving every soul into your trap. And today, I'm not here to tell you to dream bigger or to chase a future that floats like fog over the horizon. No, I'm here to remind you that everything they did to break you only gave you more pieces to play with. Every betrayal gave you a new weapon. Every scar was a blueprint. Every silence you endured was just another room inside your fortress being built in silence. And when they laughed, when they walked away, when they underestimated you, when they mocked the way you waited instead of chasing, when they misunderstood your stillness as fear, they walked right into the slow trap you had been building from the beginning. And that trap was not metal, it wasn't rope, it was patience, it was time, it was the silence of someone who already saw 10 steps ahead. Because what they never understood is that your pain was never wasted. Every moment they thought you were losing, you were actually building. You were learning how they moved, what they feared, where they would run, if cornered. And more importantly, you were learning yourself. You were burning down the lies that told you to act fast, to please, to bend, to break, to fit, to fear. And you replaced every lie with a law, a personal law, a rule of your new order. And the truth is, when the lights went out, when they left you behind, when no one saw what you were becoming, that is when you were most dangerous, because silence is not weakness. Stillness is not fear. Waiting is not losing, and revenge is not noise. It is calculation. It is control. It is having the strength to watch the clock bleed out seconds while you remain calm, cold, unreadable, because every second makes the board more yours. They never asked why you were so calm. They never wondered why your eyes didn't flicker, why your hands didn't shake, why you let them talk, why you let them walk away. They never thought maybe you weren't silent because you were broken. Maybe you were silent because you had already won. And the win was never noise. It was never about proving them wrong with words. It was always about letting them realize too late that every road they took led back to you. Every mistake they made was not an accident. It was placed there by your stillness, by your patience, and by your absolute refusal to play fast and weak. They thought they had the upper hand, but the hand they saw was not yours. It was the one you gave them to hold while your real hand built. The world behind their backs, brick by brick, pain by pain, loss by loss. You were building, and when they see it, they won't understand how you did it, because the rules you follow aren't written in books. They're written in scars, and scars don't explain themselves. They command, they don't teach, they remind. You don't rise because they clap for you. You rise because you keep moving. Long after they thought you stopped, you don't rise because you are fearless. You rise because you walk toward what they run from. You don't become a force because you have support. You become it because you learn how to stand so long in the dark that you begin to see what others never will. And what you see becomes your map, your power, your edge. And you will never share that map because it was paid for in silence. It was bought with every night. You cried alone with no hand to hold. It was earned every time you held your anger in your chest, like a fire, waiting for the right wind to let it roar. And now, that wind is here. Now that moment is rising. Now the board is yours. And the ones who played dirty, the ones who smiled as they took pieces from you, those pieces never belonged to them. They belonged to you, and you let them borrow it, just long enough for them to feel safe, just long enough for them to think they were clever, just long enough for you to snap the trap shut and take it all back. because revenge isn't loud. It isn't fast. It doesn't show up dressed in rage. It shows up in silence, in timing, in strategy. It shows up when the room is cold and your eyes are colder. It shows up not with screams, but with stillness. And it doesn't knock. It walks through the door and takes a seat at the throne. They tried to steal, and when you sit there, they won't even recognize you, because the version of you that cried is gone. The version that begged is buried. The version that chased has become the version that hunts. And when you hunt, you don't run. You don't scream. You don't panic. You study. You track. You wait. You become what they fear when they're alone and hear nothing. Because that's when they know they walked into something far older, far colder, and far more unstoppable than anything they planned for. And that is the trap. They thought they were clever. They thought they were powerful, but they forgot. You were the one who doesn't move unless the outcome is already certain. They forgot. You were not reacting, you were arranging. They forgot you didn't speak. Because you didn't have words, you didn't speak. Because words would have ruined the precision of your setup. They forgot that every failure you endured was not a loss. It was a log. It was a note in your hidden book of how the game works. They forgot you weren't playing to win. You were playing to own, and that ownership is not given. It's taken in the dark, in silence, in pain, in fire. And when you have paid in all of those currencies, the world becomes your chessboard and every piece bends. Not because you forced it, but because the game was always yours, and they just never saw the rules you were following. They never saw that your silence was your strategy, your losses were investments, your patience was your weapon, and your stillness was your storm, holding back until the perfect moment. Because real power doesn't chase, it doesn't argue, it doesn't explain real power. Waits in the shadows and learns everything. It waits until it knows the terrain, the enemy, the rules, and then it breaks them all and rewrites the story. Not with permission, but with precision. Not with apologies, but with intention. And when that moment comes, when the board is yours and the game is reset, they will sit there, trying to understand how you turned dust into dominance, how you took ashes and built empires, and they won't believe you did it without their help, because they thought, without them, you were nothing. But you were never nothing. You were just becoming something too big, too deep, too silent for them to recognize. And now that you have built it, now that you stand at the peak, not because someone pulled you there, but because you clawed your way through betrayal, through failure, through silence and doubt and solitude. Now that you are here, you don't scream. You don't beg for recognition. You don't need credit, because kings don't ask to be seen. They are felt, and the way you are felt is not by noise, but by presence. It's in how you walk into a room and say nothing, yet everything shifts. It's in how your past doesn't haunt you, because you turned it into a fortress. It's in how the ones who tried to bury you now build fences to keep you out, because they know what you are and they fear what you can take back. And here's the truth. They always knew. They just hoped you wouldn't realize it, because the moment you saw what you are, what you've always been, the game was done, the pieces were set, the trap was closed, and they were already inside it, because everything they used to hurt you became part of your formula. Every betrayal became data. Every setback became leverage. Every lie they told was a mirror you smashed and used the shards to carve your name into the future. And now your name echoes, and not because you shouted it, but because you whispered it into the bones of the board itself. And that board, the one they played on, the one they danced around on, with their arrogance and laughter and petty pride, it was never neutral. It was never theirs. It was yours. Every square, every step, every outcome was yours. And you built it while they slept, while they mocked, while they left. And when they came back expecting to rule, they found nothing left to rule because the kingdom was already yours. And the only thing they could do was stare at the gates and realize they never even knew where the throne was. And you sit on that throne, not with pride, but with purpose, not with vengeance, but with vision, because the trap was never just about them. It was about awakening what was in you the entire time. And now that it's awake, it doesn't sleep, it doesn't break, it doesn't doubt. And the world will learn that you are not one to be played with. You are not one to be counted out. You are not one to be moved by noise, because you've become the silence that breaks worlds. And what they don't understand is, you didn't come here to compete. You came here to change the entire game. And those who laughed, those who walked away, those who called you weak will never laugh the same way again, because somewhere deep down, they know that every smile they wore, every step they took, every cruel word they threw at you helped shape the exact trap they fell into. And now the walls are closing in, not with hate, but with truth, not with fire, but with ice, and truth cuts colder than any blade. You don't need to say anything because the results will be so loud. The silence will deafen them. The success will blind them. And the power you now carry is the kind that doesn't show itself unless it chooses to. And when it does, it rewrites the balance of everything they thought was permanent. You are the storm they denied, the shadow they forgot, and the architect of a future they don't get to be part of anymore. Because you didn't rise to prove a point. You rose because the universe had no choice but to move when you decided to stand, and that kind of power isn't given. It's not even taken, it's summoned. And now that it's here, it changes everything. And from this point forward, you don't walk, you don't chase, you don't explain. You simply continue building, moving, calculating. And anyone who steps wrong, anyone who tries to repeat the past, they will find themselves in a trap made not from hatred, but from history. Because your history is a weapon now, and your memory is a map of every failed attempt to break you, and no one gets to erase that. No one gets to forget what they did not, because you're angry, but because you remember, not out of pain, but out of precision. Because forgetting is what weak people do to survive, but remembering is what kings do to reign, and you are not here to survive anymore. You are here to dominate, and that domination won't look like chaos. It will look like order. It will look like peace on the surface, and war beneath it, because the calmest waters hold the strongest currents, and that is what you've become. And those currents don't ask permission to move. They take everything in their path and redefine it, and what you take from this world will never be stolen. It will be earned, and when it's earned, it can never be undone. They will call you cold. They will call you distant. They will call you ruthless, because they cannot understand how someone who was once bleeding now holds the sword they once used against you and wields it with such precision that it cuts through their lies, through their plans, through their masks, and reveals the truth they never wanted seen. And that truth is, you were never weak, you were just waiting. And now that the wait is over, the truth walks in with you, and it will never leave, because every move you made was a trap they walked into, and they will never be able to forget it. And now that the truth stands naked, now that the world starts to shift, now that the ones who once sat on thrones built from noise begin to realize those thrones were always made of glass, and you have become the hammer, the reckoning, the consequence. They never planned for the silence you once held. Like a weight is now the very silence that chokes them, because they cannot understand how someone they dismissed, ignored, overlooked, crushed, could rise and rise, not by chance, not by pity, but by ruthless design. And now the game is flipped, the table is turned, and you are no longer trying to earn your place at their table, because you burned that table in your mind years ago and built your own out of steel and stone and solitude. And when they knock at your door, when they try to come back with their smiles and half-hearted apologies, when they pretend not to remember what they did, how they left, how they laughed, how they told others you were finished, let them see the cold in your eyes. Let them feel the silence inside you that no longer waits for anything, because you are not here to relive the past. You are here to rule the future, and in that future there is no space for weakness. Not because you hate it, but because you buried it, and that grave became your foundation, and that foundation now holds an empire. One they will never understand, because they never saw the blueprints. They never saw the years you spent building alone, cutting ties, not out of anger, but necessity, shedding layers until nothing remained except the version of you that no longer breaks, no longer begs, no longer bleeds. You are no longer someone trying to find the light. You are someone who became it, and that kind of light burns not with hope, but with fire. It doesn't guide, it consumes. It doesn't shine, it blinds. And they will never be ready for that blaze, because the blaze isn't just heat, it's memory, it's justice. It's the full weight of everything you endured returning not as a cry for sympathy, but as a warning. And those who once thought they knew you will now find themselves strangers in your shadow. And that shadow stretches farther than they thought possible, because it is made of every moment. They underestimated you, and those moments never disappeared. They gathered, they sharpened, they learned how to wait. And now they are weapons in your hands, and you no longer hesitate to use them. Let them wonder how you got here. Let them dig through the ruins of what they thought was your defeat. Let them try to piece together how the one they forgot became the one they cannot ignore. And while they search, while they struggle, while they drown in their own confusion, you continue building, continue moving, continue winning, because this is not your ending. This is not your victory lap. This is just the beginning of a reign, built not on validation but vengeance, not on approval but absolute unshakable purpose. And when you walk through the ruins of your past, you don't cry, you don't pause, you don't flinch, you nod, because every piece of it was necessary. Every pain was placement, every failure was foundation, and every betrayal was brick. And now you walk alone, not because no one wants to walk with you, but because no one can keep up. Now you move in silence, not because you fear noise, but because your actions speak in storms, and the wind carries your name to places you haven't even touched yet. And the fear in their hearts is not that you changed. It's that you always had this in you, and they never saw it coming, and they never will, because the next time they see you, you won't be standing in front of them, you'll be above them, not with pride, but with clarity, not with arrogance, but with certainty, that you are no longer reachable, no longer explainable, no longer touchable, because you cross that invisible line between becoming and being. And once you cross it, nothing is the same again. You have become the gravity, the force, the calculation, the inevitability, and they feel it in their bones. Not because you told them to, but because nature doesn't ask for recognition. It demands respect. And now your presence is nature. Your decisions are law. Your silence is thunder. And your focus is fire. And they can try to resist. But the truth is, they lost the moment. They underestimated your patience. They lost the moment they mistook kindness for weakness. They lost the moment they thought you would stay broken. And every move you made from that moment forward was not survival. It was setup. It was placement. It was preparation for the day. They would come face to face with the person they swore would never rise again. And when they do, they will not see you. They will see everything they did to you, staring back through eyes that no longer recognize fear. They will see every doubt they planted return to them fully. groan, every insult, every abandonment, every time they spoke your name, like it meant nothing, every time they tried to define you to others, every time they thought they were ahead, will collapse into a single truth. They cannot escape. They were never playing the game. They were the game, and you built it, you shaped it, and you won it before they even knew it began. And now you no longer wait for justice because you became it. You no longer hope for change because you are the one who changes the direction of the storm. You no longer look back for closure because you buried the past beneath the empire you built from it. And every move you made, every time you held back, every time you stayed quiet when your soul screamed to speak, was another piece of the board sliding into place. And now they finally see it too late, that nothing was random, nothing was weakness, nothing was wasted. It was all part of a design they could never comprehend, a design written in shadows, carved through pain, and perfected in silence. And now you don't need to remind them who you are, because the game is over, and the board they played on was never theirs. It was yours from the beginning. So when they speak your name, now, they speak it carefully. When they hear your steps, now, they listen closely because they know every move you make is not reaction. It is command. It is strategy. It is the final echo of a trap they walked into thinking they were in control. And now they understand that control was never in their hands. It was always in yours, and you never needed their permission to win. You just needed them to keep playing long enough to lose. And now they are silent because they know you built the board, and every step they took was yours all along.